Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, which is Irina Tuckerman. Irina is a human rights and national security lawyer based in New York, and also she's a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute. She runs a boutique national security law practice, and she's a member of the American Bar Association's Energy and Environment and Science and Technology sections. Well, Irina, and welcome to the missing piece.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Irina, as we mentioned before, what happened over the weekend to the nation of Israel, it's rather devastating and also saddening, not just to the people in Israel, but also to the entire international community. Now, someone says that because of the Israel's what we say a system failure and that provide loophole for Hamas to attack the nation of Israel. And also, some believe that Israel is, quote, overconfident and complacency and unwilling to imagine that Hamas could launch a cross border attack like this. I want to get your reaction, and why do you think it's happening today?
I think intelligence failure is one of the factors involved here. I think there is other factors. I'll get to them. But let's look at these two issues, intelligence failure and complacency. Without a doubt, Israel has the capability to gather very accurate, very informed intelligence. And there were red flags that Hamas was preparing for some escalation. Uh, the first sign has been its participation in Ramadan attacks, which were essentially a smaller version of what happened. There was a massive rocket attack, and there was also an instigation of local violence inside Israel, including rocket throwing attacks at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and various riots in Arab-populated communities inside Israel. So at the very least, we knew that Hamas was certainly prepared for attacks for specific occasions. It has already done so earlier this year, and there was no reason not to watch it. Moreover, only weeks before this attack, Israel intercepted a shipment of explosives from Turkey into Gaza, which was another red flag pointing towards a preparation for some sort of an operation at the very least. Why would Turkey be sending explosives to Gaza when Erdogan has claimed to restore ties with Israel and had participated very actively in conversations with Israeli officials? That's a bigger question that we can get to later. But the fact is, the red flags, the signs were all there. And Israel, no matter how complacent, has the general intelligence habit of gathering and listening to conversations and chatter. This is normal, regardless of whether you expect something to happen or not. So, for sure, when you have a huge operation like what happened planned, that takes at least a number of months, if not longer, and hundreds, if not thousands, of active participants, something is going to break out. You will have that intelligence. Now, what happens after you have this information? Is it going to be accurate in terms of the timing, location? Is it going to be, are you going to be, will you find the sources reliable? Will you be able to share intelligence with other agencies in time to put together the information and to understand that this is more than just theoretical discussions? Will you be able to get approval for what you need to prepare in advance? Are you looking at the right information? Are you analyzing it the right way? Did you draw the correct conclusions from what you are hearing? Now, those questions that are yet to be answered, but I'm not sure that complacency alone is enough to understand what happened, because no matter how complacent you are, if you have actionable intelligence, you are going to be following up on it, you're going to be looking into it, you're going to be preparing. So what could go wrong? Any number of other things. You may not have enough resources allocated to handle it quickly enough. You may have conflicting assignments that force your hand to be somewhere else, even if you're dealing with an emergency here, and it could be any number of things. You could be misdirected towards a particular key piece of intelligence that distracts you or misleads you to take a different sort of action. You could be dealing with internal resistance, indecisiveness in the face of a critical situation. You could be dealing with pressure from your allies. In 1973, Israel was fully aware of an impending Egyptian attack, but it was warned by the United States not to take preemptive action. You could also be dealing with traitors, moles, and saboteurs inside your agencies that have prevented relevant intelligence from moving to where it should be. None of those things have anything remotely to do with complacency and everything to do with various forms of failures at various levels that could combined lead to that particular outcome. Combined with that once those things have already failed, the response is going to be affected, because if you are completely not prepared for anything happening, you're not going to be able to respond quickly enough and figure out quickly enough, and there's going to be confusion. And if the operation is planned well, as it was, you're going to be disrupted at every level from the beginning to the end, which is what happened. Apparently, some of the terrorists were obtained military or police uniforms, and once Israelis on the ground, local security forces at various locations, they were misled into believing those were other Israelis and did not react quickly enough. So those are just some of the factors that can lead to this situation, but that still does not explain in total this element of complete shock and surprise at an institutional level. And it also doesn't explain the seeming silence from allied intelligence groups. Israel has a number of logistical and intelligence partners from around the world who deal with many of the same problems, not just because of Israel or agreements, but because these actors are bad actors who cause problems in other areas. So the fact that no one seems to have known anything puts the onus of responsibility on the international community, because Hamas is a global actor. It's not just a regional actor. It has announced its intentions to cause harm in other countries after boasting about Iranian support. So this is an international problem. It's not just Israel's problem. So the failure, while it affects Israel disproportionately, also impacts everyone else. And the question is, why has no one raised this issue publicly? Because beyond Israel, it has a potential to affect many, as it has. There were non-Israeli citizens impacted by the situation.
Irina, again, you mentioned so many significant points, but again, one of them, indeed, Hamas is not just a Israel's issue, or it's not just a threat that poses to Israel, but also it's a threat to the entire international community. Now, also, as we mentioned in the intro, current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that this country is officially at war. Now, I want to get your take on also to evaluate his performance. How do you think that he's going to handle this crisis on a personal or on a professional level? And believe me that, again, this is a real test for Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, we believe his leadership, and we've seen that previously that he addressed those issues even during his election campaign. But right now, we're looking at the moment that Benjamin Netanyahu is a leader for the country, and also it's in a hot seat because of what happened. So help us with understanding that how do you think he's going to handle this on this personal and also on this professional level? Your thoughts?
I will completely put aside any critiques or commentary I have about his previous performance up until this point. What he should be doing now is entering a unity government with the opposition partners, which is exactly what Levi Eshkol did back in the day. The opposition parties, Gantz and Lapid, have called for an emergency coalition. But their objection to the current format was Ben-Gvir and Smotrich's participation. And in my opinion, Netanyahu should have agreed quickly to at least temporarily suspend these two individuals, one of whom proved to be criminally incompetent in the handling of the situation. It's ultimately his responsibility, no matter what went wrong, who he's the boss, he's in charge. You can investigate and analyze the reasons, but for now it's his responsibility. So he should have done everything possible to make this emergency coalition possible. These individuals add nothing to the handling of the emergency, whereas it's very important to see the coalition, the united front against terrorism, and the symbolic putting aside of all the preceding internal domestic differences, many of which are blamed for the contribution to this crisis to begin with. The fact that he has not done so yet is concerning, and I hope this changes very quickly, because this is a drastically needed measure. With respect to the more security-oriented issues, he is facing a number of dilemmas, and I'm not sure that there is a right answer how to handle the military aspects, because all of them come with upsides and downsides, which have nothing to do with leadership quality. They're just extremely tough choices. But as a leader, what he should be doing now is reaching out to the international community, using this rare moment of broad general goodwill to rally support, not a military support. Israel is not looking for other people to fight Hamas physically, but intelligence sharing, understanding of a common problem. And in response to the calls for de-escalation that came from many parties, friends, allies, as well as less friendly countries, he should be calling them out for solutions, alternative solutions. If they are concerned about minimizing human casualties, then what actions can they take to deter Hamas from any future engagements? Are they going to put Hamas on a international sanctions list? Are they going to cut off the flow of weapons and money and funding coming into Hamas and sanction anybody who engages in that? Because Hamas has received broad support from various groups: Iran, first and foremost, Muslim Brotherhood operations, Turkey, huge money from Qatar, which has boasted about supplying Hamas at various points, with Israel's agreement, by the way, and the U.S. role in that as well. And we have seen Russia invite Hamas delegation to Moscow. They invited Hamas, and various Iranian proxies too have offered help, assistance, exchange of expertise, weapons sharing, and so forth at various points in time. All these actors, if the international community, if these countries are serious about both minimizing Israeli and Palestinian casualties and securing the region against terrorism, they should be cooperating with Israel and taking serious action, and not playing games and pretending that Hamas is in any way a legitimate entity that deserves to govern and can have a free reign in the region. Otherwise, their calls for de-escalation with Israel are nothing but bluff and hypocrisy, and Israel would be correct in ignoring them completely. So if Netanyahu wants to show leadership, now is the time to both compel the sort of cooperation and build a coalition of real allies, and also to push back against any criticism and of Israel and its security concern with this demonstration of reality.
Irina, again, we heard the statement from Benjamin Netanyahu, but also on Saturday, the Hamas political leader also spoke that these are the words that he said, and also want to get your reaction on this. He said the countries of normalization and the enemy will not provide you with security and protection. The struggle will be determined in the field by the blood of martyrs and also the heroism of the Palestinian people. And again, people believe that what happened in Israel could be considered as equivalency of September 11th of the United States. Now, by looking at or by listening to the words from the Hamas leader, Arena, what message do you think that we should get and we should understand? Particularly, it says the struggle will not be determined. The struggle will be determined in the field by the blood of martyrs. What do you think of that?
I think the message is very clear. Not only is there a genocidal intent against Israelis and anyone else who gets in the way, but there is a genocidal intent against the Palestinian people by Hamas. He intends to sacrifice as many civilians and brainwashed, indoctrinated, disaffected young people as he needs to in order to demonstrate a political point and achieve his political agenda. And I think this is nothing short of complete disregard for human life, if not something more sinister.
Irina, I know you're very busy. I got two more questions before letting you go. Now, historically speaking, it's remarkable that this is happening like 50 years ago, almost on the same day that, to the much surprise, the Arab attack on Israel that launched, again, you mentioned in 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Now, Hamas doesn't have any interest in making peace with Israel. In other words, we'll look at the history and we'll look at the current political states. As you mentioned before, Hamas is not just a threat to the nation of Israel, it's a threat to the entire international community. Now, again, going back to the fact that Hamas had no interest in making peace with Israel. Is there any correlation between what happening today to 1973, and what lessons do you think the world should understand and should learn at this moment?
There are two issues. One issue is technical in terms of handling by Israel, and one is broader and geopolitical. I'll start with the Israel handling of the issue. In both cases, this happened on a weekend and on a holiday when most people are away, when the military is more relaxed. Many of the soldiers go home for the weekend or for the holidays with their families, and of course, the guard is down. No matter how you want to look at it, it's going to be down. Hamas has had a pattern of escalation, and there were no visible external indicia that this would be the particular moment. Again, I don't know about the quality of intelligence, but let's assume that for whatever reason they didn't put it together. And only last week, IDF's assessment publicly was that Hamas was not prepared for war. So, for whatever reason, Hamas clearly had the understanding that Israel was not expecting a blow at this time. This is a different situation from what happened with Egypt, because Israelis were receiving human intelligence. They were prepared. The Egyptian military was right at the border. It was obvious. The issue was with the timing of the attack, when exactly it would take place, and whether Israel should heed the warnings of the Americans and not take preemptive action, which turned out to be a catastrophic mistake. Yes, it was caught unawares in a certain sense, but not nearly as much as people agree. So, and we still, by the way, don't totally know the reasons for the current failures. One issue, by the way, that decries the complacency theory is a possibility of a cyber attack affecting the response and affecting the immediate local intelligence gathering. We're talking about Iron Dome potentially being either overwhelmed with the rockets or even affected by a virus, by a Trojan. And we were also talking about cameras and alarms all being systematically disabled, which points to some level of sabotage which prevented the security services from getting accurate information on time. It was a technical issue. Some point to over-reliance on technology and under-reliance on traditional corroborations of human intelligence. But again, right now it's really just too early to tell how much of each was a problem. Now, when we're talking about a geopolitical issue, in the 1970s, the context of this of attacks on Israel, first of all, they were state-driven. PLO, of course, was a terrorist organization that was backed by the Soviet Union and by China, trained militant liberation movement pushing for a state, but more accurately being used as a tool against Israel by Arab states and by the communist parties of those respected entities. But um, truth be told, the Arab states were actually the ones doing a great deal of the open aggression, not just terrorist organizations. This is not the case. Not the case today. Israel has either normalized with a number of those countries, including Egypt, or it has achieved some sort of understanding where there's simply no interest, even among tensions, in attacking Israel directly. We do not expect a direct attack from a Saudi military, for instance, or from even from Iraqi military, even if you're expecting an attack from a militia that is based in Iraq with Iran's blessing and Iraqi government's complacency. It's still a different picture. The Palestinian issue was the peak of that crisis. It was being used as an excuse, as a scapegoat for these states to avoid addressing their own internal failures and challenges. And there was a great deal of upheaval in those countries. Today, for the last few years, we have seen a shift away from excessive focus on this issue to more economic regional integration, which meant also a push for cooperation with Palestinians and Israelis on economic agendas, business, and so forth. So we are seeing that some actors for whom this weaponization of the Palestinian issue was a raison d'etre, a way to advance their own agendas, become disillusioned with this development of more economy, more business, more pragmatic oriented relationships in the Middle East, and they decided to push for a return to a terrorism-driven liberation movement, kind of Palestinian identity politics-driven approach to displace this new dynamic. And we see that it has been succeeding, but this attack is not the pinnacle. It's not the only thing that made it successful. I think too many people are giving too much credit to this one incident, claiming that it has disrupted the expansion of Abraham Accords. It was certainly meant to have a chilling effect, to be sure, but the dynamics in the Arab states have been negative for some time. For the past couple of years, since the Biden administration, we have seen a chill. For all the talk about Saudi-Israeli normalization, we have not seen any direct talks between Israeli and Saudi officials on this issue, and the media in Saudi Arabia has been quite negative. Same country has also met a Hamas delegation around Ramadan time, during the peak of these attacks in Israel. So the dynamic was already going in that direction, in part due to the support of Muslim Brotherhood and conservative types in Middle Eastern countries by the Biden administration, in part to thanks to the focus on Iran and displacement of the Sunni-oriented dynamic towards the Iran and its support for the Islamic Revolution. Iran has grown tremendously in power. It has normalized with Arab states without having to make any concessions whatsoever. It has expanded its militias throughout the region. It expanded its influence, and it has it has worked with Islamists, with oligarch factions, conservative factions, nepotistic and corrupt factions in various countries to bring about displacement of governments, or in some cases, displacement of ruling factions. The reformists in Saudi Arabia who were pushing for modernization, for a more liberal approach in the region on foreign and domestic policy, have taken a severe hit thanks to Iran's expansion in that regard. And we also saw a general shift towards Russia, authoritarian states, away from engagement from the US. So this comes hand in hand with the anti-Israel dynamic, or it's part of the same broader geopolitical package. We should not think that Israel is just one factor. This is more part of a global issue, and we should not make the mistake of thinking that all these countries merely react to something Israel or US do. They have their own agendas, their own dynamics, and other actors are aware of that and work to exploit them as well.
Irina, I want to wrap up our conversation again since you mentioned the role of US. Let's bring US into our conversation. The last question is, how much do you think that what happened in Israel could actually slow down the progress for the US to continue to make progress in the Middle East? Again, as a fact, you mentioned before, and Saudi Arabia, it's very much open to normalization with the nation of Israel, and also US has been.
Allow me to interrupt. I actually said exactly the opposite. The optics are that it is open, but it actually is the opposite of open. To preempt your question, I think certainly there is an attempt to slow down Abraham Accords, to disrupt the efforts at this even trying to happen. But in my opinion, I think it actually gives an excuse to those who already didn't want it to happen to just finally put a formal end to it. The Biden administration has been pursuing contradictory goals in the Middle East. On the one hand, normalization with Iran. It has pushed Saudi Arabia towards Iran. Let's be honest with ourselves here. It's been pushing even China's role because it thought that China could be an effective broker on this issue, and it just doesn't want to be very involved in the Middle East and deal with the daily reality of various crises and disputes and tensions between assorted entities. At the same time, it has tried to bring Israel into the fold and expand these relationships in order to take credit for them, but not in a way that is effective. It has alienated the reformists. It had weakened the reformists, particularly in Saudi Arabia, by attacking the crown prince. Biden has attacked him personally from the very beginning. That really made it very easy for his enemies to rise up and to kind of take the initiative on. If you look at the Saudi media internally in Arabic, what they are writing in Arabic is quite different from what comes out in English, and what is coming out in English these days is also not so great. But where previously, only a few years ago, there were intellectuals and analysts floating the ideas of normalization with Israel in Arabic public, and you could have this conversation with the Saudi government officials. Today, internally, this is a taboo topic. It is saved only for when Westerners come in for meetings and international gatherings. So there's a double speak on this issue. There's a strong signal, but there's not a willingness to meet directly with the Israeli officials. There are talks about defense deals with the US that everyone knows is not going to happen in the format that Saudis demanded. All of that is just an excuse to try to gain concessions from Biden because he is desperate. But normalized with Iran, with China's and Russia's influence in those countries, it's very unlikely that there is any, already it was a very difficult issue even previously. Saudi Arabia and other GCC states are very, very tribal societies, and many of the tribes in Saudi Arabia are quite indisposed to formal diplomatic normalization, although they were willing to do business and engage in defense arrangements. So they have a lot of weight, more so in some ways than members of the royal family. And in that sense, they can pressure the king, they can pressure the royal family, they can pressure the ruling circle. So that already was a major challenge that the Biden administration has not understood at all. They have zero understanding of the tribal societies. Our diplomats do not live extensively in Arab states, and they just also don't engage beyond political circles that spoon-feed them the information that they want to hear. And same thing with the media. The media also does not understand the cultural issues, and therefore it reports things that these circles, the messaging that they want message to the West, the signal. So it's a one-way communication. We don't really hear what the real people are thinking and talking, and what the real issues in Saudi Arabia even are. And Israel is certainly not a priority and has not been. But it has gotten significantly worse since then. The split even in these ruling political elite circles between the reformists and the anti-reformists, the conservatives, the old guards, the nepotist, corrupt factions who just want to hold on to power and willing to cut deals with anybody, even Iran, it has shifted in favor of those other people. We have seen it with Iran's normalization, with the flow of Russian and Chinese money into the country, and the other way around as well. So Israel is by far, it's not in anyone's interest to do that. They're getting everything they want from Israel without having to make any sacrifices whatsoever, without having to deal with public opinion, and certainly without having to sacrifice their own values. These people are not fans of Israel. These groups are quite conservative. Many of them have been indoctrinated for decades, and they have used reformists to gain positive PR and investment and attention, and now they are looking to revert back to the way things were back in the 70s. And we are seeing that in the statement that came from Saudi Arabia, that reflected the language from Iran and from Qatar, not from European Union, not from India, not from other actors that were more or less, acknowledge the horror of terrorism while asking Israel to consider human casualties on the Palestinian side. No, they basically blamed Israel for this attack, not in terms of intelligence failure, but morally. They engaged in moral victim blaming. So Biden's model of normalization is a chimera. It's a fantasy. It could not happen. But these situations, this attack and Iran's and Hamas alliance, first of all, gave it an easy excuse to put an end to this game of pretend that we've been watching play out for the past year in a very bizarre, overwhelming, propagandistic way. And on the other hand, so it gives Saudis a way to exit gracefully. And the other issue it accomplishes, it has a chilling effect on those few active actors inside the region who were still hopeful to actually accomplish something, make some sort of progress, even if not full normalization. It makes it more difficult for them, certainly, because of Israel's loss of prestige, loss of value as a strong partner in defense. It limits what Israel can do, even on the level it has achieved, because it has achieved quite a lot in terms of defense arrangement with those countries, but now it is isolated, it is alone. None of them are going to fight against Iran or any of these militias or proxies. That is what we are seeing. That is the real horror of the disruption of what is happening. Not that Biden was ever really going to accomplish anything, having insulted a Saudi leadership, but that even those things that had already been achieved are being reversed.
Irina, again, I really appreciate your deep analysis. Of course, that we're looking at what happened in the nation of Israel. And also, again, it's not just a threat to the nation of Israel, and also it's a threat to the international community. Now, again, at the end of the day, we agree that conflict or war should never be the solution to stability or to peace. And of course, we'll continue to keep the nation of Israel in prayer.